everyone who's joining us. And, we'd love to, while everyone's, popping on, why don't you just hop in the chat for a second, say hi, let us know where you're from if you're not hailing from New York City, or even if you are. And let us know if you're a fan of snow or not, because, with the huge storms down the Northeast, there's been a lot of, on social media, people who are loving the snow, not loving the snow, over the snow already. So I'd love to see that in the chat while we're waiting for some more folks to pop in, and then we'll kick off. So some hellos. I'm really excited to see some chats here. Aaron, Gerard, thanks for joining. Joe, always great to see you. Jennifer, nice to see you're here. Hey, Josh. Naomi, I'm so excited. Peg, great to see you. Ruth, got some great people coming in, joining. So nice to see everyone. Lena, Peter, Kelly, and Kate. So Peter is loving the snow. Peter, feel free to come on down and shovel for me this weekend and Sunday, because I'm so over shoveling. And who else is here? Joe, always great to see you. Oh, Chet's letting us know that Mammoth Mountain Village has a webcam. Sounds fun. Naomi's hailing all the way from Pittsburgh. Very cool. And Don loves the snow. Awesome. I love the snow. I just don't love shoveling it after, but it looks beautiful, while it's all happening. So I think we can kick off. So welcome to DMCNY's Midweek Recharge. I'm Ginger Conlon, president of DMCNY. And today we are going to talk about innovations from 2020 that marketers can take advantage of in 2021 that will positively impact marketing. So before we get started, of course, I want to take a moment to thank our annual sponsors. Without their generous support, we wouldn't be able to put on events such as this. So thank you so much to our platinum sponsor, Axiom, our gold sponsors, Wyland and Alliant, and our bronze sponsors, Jeffs Olson and Epsilon. And a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any tech issues, just go ahead and put that in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye out, and we'll try and help you right away. If you have any questions for the speakers during the presentation, just go ahead and put them in the chat as well. I will keep an eye out and ask them throughout, but also ask, we'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. And with that, what we're going to do is first, I wanted to say quickly hi to our speakers, and then we're going to take some time to network, because it'll be so great to catch up with each other. So, as you know, so many changes from COVID-19 realities and restrictions have pushed all of us to think differently, to take what the innovations that have been happening and try to apply them even faster than we normally would, adopt new tools and new strategies. And so joining us today are three people who really know their stuff, and we're going to kind of dig in to talk about some of these digital changes, but also some non-digital changes that maybe marketers might overlook. So we've got renowned CRM analyst Paul Greenberg, 360 Live Media's founder and CEO Don Neal, and Jack Hojnar, who is head of systems and marketing innovation at CBSI. And I'm so excited to have them all here with us today. So, say hi in the chat, and then we are going to take a moment now to break out into networking groups, say hi to everybody, catch up with each other, and then in about 15-20 minutes, we'll come back and start the main discussion. So see you all soon. See a few of you in a few minutes, and see you all back shortly.
forgot I was going to end up in a room.
We have somebody,
Where am I?
some new people. I'll sign them now.
I'll let Paul back in. Danielle Brooks. I'll let her in, and then we'll assign her.
I got crashed.
Oh, I have Bill.
There's another person coming. David Huarte. Can you see them, Kathy? Danielle's here and David.
Do that. We're going.
Hey, we're gonna put you in a breakout room.
As soon I got put in the breakout room actually,
Yeah.
and then it just crashed me.
Oh, crashed you?
Literally the time. Yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter whether I'm in or not. It's just what happened was it put me in breakout room 2, and as soon as I went into the room, I just ended up disconnected from the meeting, which is literally the first time that ever
Oh,
happened.
no. Yeah, I ended up too, but I just jumped back to
Yeah, I just
here.
went.
Did you want to be in a room, Paul, or you want to
No. Actually, I'm going to sit.
hang out with the cool kids?
That's right. Hang with you guys. I'm going to I have to sit and do a little bit of writing.
Okay.
I got to get something over to someone. So let's see.
Okay, I was magically muted. I think all or most of us are back in the main room. So it's time to kick off our conversation with our 3 speakers. And the first question is going to be the hardest one. It's the, please introduce yourself. So yes, please let us know a little bit about who you are so that we have a point of context as you share your various answers to the different questions. So Paul, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks. So I'm Paul Greenberg. I'm the managing principal of the 56 Group LLC, which is basically me. And I've been in the CRM, customer experience, customer engagement universe, not even though I was a VP of marketing at one point in my life, for 20 plus years. I've written 8 books on the subject, mostly one book, which had 4 editions, 9 languages, called CRM Speed of Light. Most recently, though, I'm focused much more around customer engagement, participation, interactivity, how to actually transform kind of what we're doing in the industry from, the kind of 2-dimensional view we've tended to have pre-COVID and even dragging into the pandemic period to more, let's call it 4-dimensional. So, and I'm actually very excited to be here. And I've known the other important thing is I've known Ginger close to 20 years. I'm going to tell you something about her right now that nobody else knows. There are in the CRM world, the original 4 independents were called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And Ginger was one of the first 4.
So yeah, so we definitely go way back. So thanks, Paul, for joining us today. And Don, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, everybody. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. My name's Don Neal. I really cut my teeth in the direct marketing industry. I worked at Rap Collins for a long time. I was at Omnicom and worked at Tribal and DDB and other agencies. And about 11 years ago, I started a company called 360 Live Media. And we are focused on live events, conferences, and trade shows, which I believe are the most powerful medium of influence and behavioral change. They're also the least measured media environments in the world until last year. So now events are really highly measured media platforms. And I'm excited to talk with you about how they might fit into your integrated marketing strategy. And I see a friend of long standing, Ruth Stevens, luminary that you are. It's good to see you. It's been a while, and excited to spend the evening with all of you.
Great, thank you. And Jack, tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
I'm really,
yourself.
I'm kind of bummed. Can you guys see me at all? It looks like you can't, right?
Oh, yeah.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk for a little bit. I'll let it get started. I'm going to jump out so I don't interfere with anything. And then I'll come back in. And it's not as though I think you really need to see me. I think my mom's the only one that appreciates the way I look, but let me be quick. I head up marketing and technology for CBSI. And in essence, we are an insurance provider of benefit products that you all know well and are part of your credit cards today, and transaction accounts. Essentially, we protect a lot of transactions that occur without many of you even knowing it. So when you rent a car, when you jump on a plane, when you purchase something at Best Buy or even at Amazon, our protection services kick in. And my role is to serve a couple of masters in addition to the bosses that I have at the company. It's to be a consumer advocate so they're aware of how these products work, because we sit right in the middle of those spaces between B2B and B2C. So I work on the consumer advocacy side to make sure they understand how the product works. And that's where a lot of the technology comes to play, APIs, SDKs, contactless stuff. And then I serve as working on the product side and the marketing side with the banks themselves to make sure that we're actually bringing the right products for their clients. And while this team doesn't work for me necessarily, I certainly know the people in the office who build those products. And it's my job to make sure the marketers of those banks we work with understand how to make all that work. So with that said, I'm going to jump out and come back in. Okay, Ginger?
Okay, we'll be waiting for you.
All right, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
So, so thanks again to everyone for being here. Just a reminder that if you have a question, if the question comes up during the conversation, just please go ahead and pop it into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye out for the chat for your questions to come in and ask them during, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, Paul and Don, I'll just toss the first question out to the two of you, or technically the second question. What innovation, whether it was a digital innovation or just some other type of innovation that was introduced or even accelerated in 2020 was overhyped and that most marketers should really just stop obsessing over?
Well, Don, do you mind if I start? So there's actually, and one of these might surprise you, but there's actually two of them. One is, and some of you I'm sure will disagree, is CDPs, way overhyped.
Customer data platforms, for those of you
who aren't in the technical universe, the technology side of it. These are, look, every let's say this, your IT people and a lot of your C-level executives at the larger companies are all looking to have CDPs. Vendors at the technology companies are pushing them. What they are theoretically is a data. It's essentially a data store that allows you to actively act on it, so that you will get kind of insights from customer data, in near real time. And they're real. I mean, they actually do exist. The problem is they become the thing to have in the industry, as opposed to let's find some actual value for this and replace the investment we did in, say, CRM, let's say more passive kind of data system or something like that. They become that kind of thing, right? Where people are buying it to have it, not to actually figure out the use value of it. So again, I'm not saying they don't have some value. I'm saying that they are way overhyped. In fact, on the vendor side, some of the largest vendors in the technology world, all of whom have marketing clouds and things like that, are literally dumbing down their own marketing to say they have a CDP when they have something that is much bigger than that. I can name names, but I won't for right now. The other one, and this is the one that I think you have to take the most caution, is something that doesn't just apply to marketing, but does dramatically impact it, which is people are way overstating the digital transformation case that the pandemic has accelerated. what you're seeing is not massive digital transformation going on in the business universe. What you're seeing is the use of a lot more digital tools. Then it's not the same thing. When you're talking about digital transformation, you're talking about fundamental change in your business model. You're talking about a fundamental change in your cultures, and the way you actually do things has to change with it, right? Right now, you're seeing, you know, this constant thing out there, which is, well, we're accelerating, we're sprinting to the finish line of digital transformation. We're sprinting to the starting line right now, and the reality is, you know, as marketers, that's going to impact you guys very directly, because ultimately you're the ones who, on two levels. One is you're the ones who are going to have to utilize those digital tools to do what you do. And if you don't have, for example, the cultural support to do it, it's going to hurt you. If you don't have the business models the company needs to support it, it's going to hurt you. And at the same time, right now, if you're starting to think it through, you'll be able to start seeing other changes that are coming on the marketing side, which I'll leave to a little later, that I think will be of real value, but only if you understand that we're at a level where conversation is beginning at a serious level, as opposed to finishing up with digital transformation. It has not happened. We're just using Zoom and Slack and all the other digital tools we have out there a lot more. And that's valuable, but it's not a sprint to the finish line for digital transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Aaron comments that agreed, not a digital transformation, more like a re-education for many, as they now have to use it, which, you know, we've been digitally transforming for how many years now, right?
Right.
It's still, and we're still in the early days of all that's possible.
Yeah, just lots more tools doesn't do it. I mean, that's the thing always to remember. You know, we're changing how we do business. It's really a good friend of some of you, and I know some of you know him. Esteban Kolsky actually put it the right way at one point. He said, these are actually what we're looking at is a fundamental business transformation. And that's really the way to think about it. Not the digital part, is just how you enable it.
Right, absolutely. Don, anything that you're seeing that's been overhyped?
Yeah, and thanks, Ginger. One thing I would like to do is I'd like to know what you all would like to talk about. So I think as soon as you can start chatting and asking questions, there's no script for tonight. I'm going to talk about events and conferences and meetings and direct marketing and anything you want to talk about. I've been doing this for all my life. So I'd love to have a kind of a feisty debate and dialogue tonight. So I don't know how many of you are B2B or B2C, but I hope you'll ask some provocative questions and we can make this as real as possible. So that would be my invitation to, let's open this up and make it, you know, Wednesday night at the Improv. So here's what I'll tell you. I started a division at Hallmark Cards called the Hallmark Loyalty Group. And it was really a B2B endeavor inside of a B2C company. And I went to every conference and trade show that was possible. Hospitality, auto, tech, you name it. We were launching this business and we went to events. This was a long time ago. And, you know, I learned pretty quickly that events are a very, you know, efficient way of reaching markets to get trial and awareness and you know, demand. But it's highly unpredictable and frankly, highly, as I said earlier, not measured. So what I think we saw in 2020 was the emergence of an event tech stack, if you will, of virtual and digital event platforms that if you're not using events in your B2B or your B2C, you know, integrated plan, you should. I mean, this is an event right now. So it is the way we're communicating, frankly, in almost every domain. And what I think I saw last year, excuse me, were hundreds of event tech platforms that came on the scene, a lot of vaporware, a lot of promises, a lot of promise of integration and polling and Q&A and gamification, et cetera. And, you know, a lot more heat than light. So I think that's the one, what I would call sort of head fake that happened last year. What has happened in the last 4 or 5 months, there are some remarkably good event tech platforms, and I'm not in the tech platform business, so I'm not pitching these. I think that are doing a really good job at very low cost. So if you're not using events or conferences or webinars or some sort of interaction face-to-face or screen-to-screen, you should consider it. And, you know, there's a lot of choices that are very low cost. So it's a little less hype, more acceleration of something that never used to work. Digital events never made any money and nobody wanted to go to them. They're terrible. Who wants to go to a screen-to-screen event when you can get on a plane and go to San Diego in the middle of the winter and meet people and, you know, live large? And so I think that bubble is burst, and now we're going back to an omni-channel mix in 2022, where digital and live are going to coexist. And I think all the bad stuff, if you run an event through an X-ray machine, you know, half of it lights up as red, as in bad. You remember the Wanamaker quote, "Half of my advertising is wasted, I just don't know which half." It's the same thing with events. Highly inefficient, but the part that works really works. So I'm pretty bullish on conferences and events, as you can imagine. I've been doing it for 10 years. So I'm more, Ginger, on the other side of the equation. I think we're seeing a renaissance in an old-fashioned medium that's coming into its own in this, you know, digital environment.
Absolutely. And it seems like maybe some of the tools are hyped versus the fact that you need to, you know, to learn how to use them well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, as you would imagine, any tech platform, anybody can start a virtual platform. They're basically just Zoom tech with a lot of layers of customization and sizzle and some gamification. But there's some really good ones out there. And, you know, they're worth taking a look at. And particularly if you're not using, as I say, you know, event tech, you should be looking at it as part of your mix.
Definitely. Ruth wants to know if if you have any favorites.
Well, yeah, I do. There's 3 or 4, Ruth, that I think are really good. EventMobi is good. FeedLoop is good. A platform called Juno is very good. There's some very high-end platforms. They can cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to do a large-scale global event in multiple languages and multiple time zones. But most of these platforms are, you know, in the neighborhood of $100,000. You can buy a good platform for $5,000 or $6,000 on the low end. FeedLoop is one with a P. I think that's a pretty good platform at a low cost. So that's a good question, Ruth.
Actually, to add to a couple that Don mentioned too, these tend to be middle to high end, and a lot of the larger enterprise companies will use these at times. But there's Intrado, which is, you know, comes from West Communications originally, and that tends to be very good on things like building out exhibition halls and lobbies. I think most of the event platforms, and maybe Don, you know, one that doesn't meet what I'm about to say, one of the biggest weaknesses is how they handle interactivity. They don't do a great job, but they do a good job on pretty much a lot of everything else. Another one, which is actually powered AWS reInvent and also Salesforce's kind of Dreamforce, the tracks part, was Kaltura, which the value of Kaltura was it comes from television originally. It's a 30-year-old company, and they come from television. They moved into video collaboration. Then they built out a substantial event platform that can handle scale and can also handle smaller events. And the quality of what they do from the standpoint, obviously from the video side of it, is off the charts. And also just the organization side. Another one, and the last one I like, but I don't love this one, is Socio. Socio is really good at organizing the meeting, basically getting you to the speakers at the times you've got to go, helping you find things. And it's okay at the actual presentation part, and it's horrible on the interactivity part. It's basically the equivalent of the chat window we have here in Zoom on an events platform. It's no better than that. So at the same time, if you're a smaller meeting and you're basically focused on organization, you know, or a larger meeting, I'm sorry, and focused on organization, it actually does do a good job there.
Let me just pile on one last thing. You need multiple platforms. If you're going to do any event, if you work in an agency and your client wants to include, you know, events in the platform and they want to take them to the next level this year, you need typically a couple of platforms if you're going to do gamification, polling, like Paul said, have a good degree of interaction, and then have a scalable enterprise-wide platform. But and they work better together now. The APIs in these tech platforms are much more translatable. But the problem is, it's like this call that we're on right now. Everybody's looking at a screen. You're looking at yourself most of the time. You know, I'm so tired at the end of the day. I'm looking at myself. I can't stand it. I have to change my clothes in the middle of the day because I'm sick of looking at what I'm wearing all day. And so I think that's part of the fatigue that we all have. And if you don't have interaction, if you don't have connectivity, it's just me blabbing on and trying to read the chat. I can't read the chat. I'm trying to look at you. So it's you know, there are platforms that do a better job. I think Paul hit the nail on the head. Interactivity and collaboration and small groups is where the action is. Like Ginger, I think you got everybody in small groups before this. That's what everybody wants. And ideally, we'd have a conversation. We'd break into some small groups. We'd go deep on your particular issue, whatever you care about. How's this linked to a print campaign, or how does retargeting link to my my event tech platform? We'd be getting into the stuff that you all care about. But right now, we just have to, we have to sort of suffer through whatever it is, 16, 20 boxes on the screen.
Right.
Back to you,
Right.
Ginger.
Well, so let's toss the question to Jack. Anything, innovations from 2020 that were really overhyped that marketers don't need to pay so much attention to in 2021?
Well, I'm kind of torn on this one because I overhype it myself. And I'm a huge fan, an enormous fan of artificial intelligence. And especially in the banking world where we're in, there's so much information. We've been using it in call centers to anticipate higher end consumers or different types of values of consumers, however the bank wants to do it. I also think where it gets overhyped is that it's a cure-all, and it's not. It requires a bucket ton of data. It requires a lot of time and patience. What I do think is there's some sort of balance. I don't mean 50-50. I mean, this measurement tool. Do you have my office that about these huge, and there's a lot of organizations, particularly on the tech side, for them. So that's your tying to artificial intelligence and data mining and all those other kinds of things. And so where I think it gets overhyped sometimes is that it's going to cure things fast. Throw a bunch of information into a system and spit something out. It doesn't work that way. In some cases, it requires years of data depending upon your organization. However, there's an interesting dynamic that.
Oh, you froze there. You froze for a minute, Jack. So the interesting dynamic is where we lost you.
Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, after you said interesting dynamic, you froze a bit.
It was brilliant. The interesting dynamic that I was getting at is that consumers are willing to share so much personal information to have the opportunity to have someone guide them. And that's the part that, and this may be my age showing, makes me a little nervous because I would never consider sharing so much. But we've encountered personally some instances where different players in the marketplace literally ask consumers to share a bunch of stuff. And if you give us these things, we'll feed you information, we'll teach you, we'll respond to you quickly. So that's why I said it's a paradox for me, because I live it, I love it. If anyone here on CBSI isn't raising their hand going, yeah, he does this all the time. I automate things that we do in the office. I'd like to automate myself right now. I do think it comes at a price, and I am just, again, I might be showing my age. I am concerned that we are willing to give up so much information for the chance to be handheld. So there's that balance for us.
Yeah. I have a comment for you, but first I want to go back to Milton had a question for Paul on CDPs. So yeah, they're fast becoming a must-have. However, could you comment on the business risks of jumping into a CDP for organizations that haven't stabilized their initial CRM foundations first?
Well, it's actually kind of funny because it's in order for you to even use a CDP, you're going to have some basic CRM infrastructure in place. Oh, let me rephrase that. In order to use it effectively, you have to have some basic infrastructure in place. And it's just nothing that's changed despite all the technology we can talk about. Bad data in is going to be bad, information out, right? And that doesn't change regardless of anything, right? So, but actually the risk isn't so much there, because literally what will happen is if without a stable kind of CRM core, operational capability, the CDP won't work right. I mean, I'm literally simplifying it, but that's the case. The problem is what you're buying, it might not be from one vendor to the other how CDP is being defined. One of the issues that vendors have had with CDPs, I mean, the ones who are producing them, is each of them is defining defining CDPs to their own benefit. Okay, so it fits whatever their idea of a CDP is. As I said, some of them are doing it to their own detriment by dumbing down the actual capabilities they have and calling it CDP, even though they have much more than just that. The other side is, on that is that if you're gonna go the route of a CDP, and I'm not necessarily recommending you do, by the way. I don't know that it's fast becoming a necessity, to be honest. I'm saying it's an important evolution of what we used to call a system of record in CRM, but that's what it is. It's an evolution. It's not a revolutionary new form of data and its use, data storage and its use. The best way to think about this is that the guy who created the whole thing is David Rabb, and I know all of you know him. And David is great. He's a great guy. He's really smart. He's built up the CDP Institute. Look, if you're actually serious about looking into it, go to the CDP Institute website and read and talk to David, talk to people there. Okay, they're basically, there's no industry standard for what it is, but that's as close as you're going to get. But be careful. I mean, sometimes the system of record you have and the algorithms you happen to be applying to it in the way you are is perfectly sufficient for what you need. Again, you don't need the shiny new thing. It's unfortunate not because again they're not valuable, but because they are so overhyped. You may be just getting a shiny new thing. Right.
And so going back to the data, bad data in is bad data out, good data in, etc. And bring us back to the AI conversation. Todd points out that that AI is the new cliche, as big data was not so long ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
What I want to make sure is communicated clearly is I grew up in databases. That's how I cut my teeth. I learned how to program for those things, and absolutely appreciate, understand the value of information. And I think someone wrote in here also, there's a simplicity level to it. Sometimes things are working well and we can overthink it. And again, just enough that I know about AI and our attempts to do some things in it is that it requires a lot. And the expectation is that it's just going to turn things around. It's not always the case. So I think you're hearing a pragmatist response from all three of us today on every question that's being asked of us. So
yeah. Well, and what's funny about what Todd's comment made me think about was, marketers love the sexy terms, right? So a lot of times they're using machine learning, and yes, machine learning is a type of AI, but they'll always say, AI, because that sounds sexier, even though they're using like a part of it. So that's kind of what resonated for me when I heard that. So thinking about digital innovations or other innovations that, got a lot of attention or got their, kickstart in 2020, what should marketers really be paying most attention to this year in 2021 that can really help them accelerate their business? What stood out for?
Mind if I jump in real quick? Yeah, great. So I still have on my desk a book by Seth Godin when I worked at a company called YesMail 20 years ago, called Permission Marketing. And my dad got it for me. I got a copy for my daughter because she's in marketing. I'm intrigued by the possibility, and I know it's getting out there a lot, and this is nothing new. Everyone should know about it, is the ability to do text marketing. And I know it's a channel, so I realize I'm going down a channel discussion right now. For what we do, because we're in a lot of relationship marketing things, text marketing can serve a big opportunity for us. And I say that because we're in the business of insurance. And so people want to know where their status is, claims, they filed something, a whole bunch of different things. To me, it opens up another avenue for us to communicate to people based upon their permission settings. So that's why, and I just want to jump in with it because I've been thinking about it a lot. We've been looking into it. Again, I emphasize permission marketing. This has to be something that someone wants to have. So I've been hit before and slammed with, particularly when the election was taking place, a bunch of unwanted texts that are coming in. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where the consumer says, expand this channel for me because I like to be in it. And so because of what we do, we have high consumer touch points. As many places that we can match for them that suits their needs is great. And then the challenge for us is, can we support it? Right? The more channels we open up, the more knowledge we have to have for those people to support those channels. So for me, text marketing, permission-based, is a big thing that we're going to be working on this year.
Love it. Love it. Don, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I haven't been swimming in the direct marketing waters specifically for 10 years. I mean, we use data obviously in everything we do, but as I'm listening to the conversation, I'm reminded, and some of you are probably old enough to remember when CRM started and when Don Peppers and Martha Rogers. Sort of like the beginning of the frenzy around, what really was database marketing and evolved into CRM. One thing I'll tell you is that we have adopted a dashboard called the 6 R's. It's stuff that's going to sound so familiar to everyone, but the 6 R's are reach, retention, relevance, reputation, revenue, and ROI. And so we've created I'll call it a framework. So when we talk to our clients, we're an agency, we go back to all the fundamentals of traditional direct marketing around addressable audiences, measuring the addressable audience, looking at lifetime value, looking at net promoter score, looking at impressions for reputation, obviously revenue and ROI. And what I have learned after all these years of doing this is most of the fundamentals are still the fundamentals, and the tools that we have today, I think, are advancing and accelerating, unless you're doing programmatic advertising, which is going to put us all out of business because, unless you're really doing high-end strategy or you work for a tech stack or Google or Facebook, I think the art and craft of direct response marketing and digital marketing, et cetera, I don't think it's changed very much. I mean, you look at demographic and firmographic and attitudinal and behavioral data, we put it into the right stew and we try to pump it out, whether it's text or whether it's programmatic. I mean, we're all using programmatic advertising. So I'm just kind of reminded of how I'd love to hear something new. I mean, I'd love to hear someone talk about something that's actually revolutionary or changed. And I'd love for somebody to say, look, in the last 10 years, Don, you're out of touch. Here's really how direct marketing or direct response marketing or one-to-one marketing or CRM has really evolved in the last 10 years. Because I'm still doing the stuff that I did 20 years ago at RAP, and I was the CMO at Marsh McLennan, and we were a database machine selling insurance through affinity programs. And I'd love to get caught up. So I don't know if anybody wants to take me on here, but I'd love to sort of do a little bit of a rap battle on why what I'm saying is so 1990s, because I'm hearing even the nature of the questions, Ginger, not you, but in particular, I think I miss this. I miss being around this kind of crowd. And what's new? Like, what are you guys worried about? What's keeping you awake at night?
That's a good question.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, Don's point is actually well taken. What I will say, though, to it is that even though the fundamentals are, ultimately boiled down to how well we communicate with someone else and have an impact on that someone else and vice versa, right? And that's pretty much it, and that is the fundamental. And, things have changed to a certain degree. It's like, there's no question that obviously, in the last year plus, the world's changed quite a bit in terms of how we, how we're thinking, what we require. Some of it's, crisis level, changes in behavior. Some of it is evolutionary, meaning over time, because we've seen the benefit and efficacy of XYZ, we're now more attuned to it. Like, one of the things I thought was just funny was that I saw a big article the other day saying basically old people are getting this online shopping thing, right? I mean, it's literally pretty much the way it was put too, which made me feel great, right? I said, I must not be old since I've been doing Amazon Prime since the day it started, right? So, the thing is that those kind of things are results, but there are things that I'd say that need to happen that aren't really, I don't want to call them trends. I mean, some of it is apparent, as you'll see in a minute, but some of it isn't, that are going to impact the future of all of this. And, look, if you're looking at something which emerged as a thing last year, which is kind of weird, and when I say it, you'll know why, it's the actual, I'll call it the evolution of, because I don't want to call it the use of, the evolution of empathy, right? And we can't underestimate what that actually is, because it actually is something, right? It's not like, the problem is, it's not a tool you use, right? It's actually the nature of how you are. And yet it's been institutionalized in a number of ways, number one. And, it's been forever. I mean, you can go back to pre-tech day, the pre-heavy tech days. And how many of you remember, I'm sure you do, the whole Tylenol cyanide thing in Chicago in the 80s. That actually, because of the CEO's empathy for the people who were poisoned by the cyanide and the Tylenol capsules, he went against all the advice of everybody in the company, and he just treated both the victims of it and the fears of the population with genuine empathetic behavior, and it literally fixed the company, right? It literally did it. You see a lot of discussions on it right now, but the question is, how do you execute and how do you implement? Well, the way it translates and has been translating, when you can deal with companies, all over the world on this, is it's translated into the doing of social good in some way, corporate philanthropy and other things. And that always is a dicey issue for marketers, especially because a lot of the companies who literally are doing great things don't want to talk about it. And marketers want to talk about it, right? And their marketers in this case are right, because especially in times like this. So, but empathy is literally, look, for example, in the last roughly month, a little more, I've done 5 different presentations from 3 different companies, all of whom requested that I do it on empathy without knowing the other ones did, right? So, I'm saying it's on the minds of people, and how you think about your corporate culture, because business empathy is a little different than personal empathy. The way you foster and support and enable the, let's say, more empathetic side of people, that becomes a really important characteristic of business behavior, and thus how you market. Like, for example, and here's a perfect example: if you're marketing with this kind of email, and I've gotten this literally. Hi, everything's terrible with COVID, isn't it? Here's the pitch. You buy me, you buy me, you buy me. COVID's bad, isn't it? The end, right? That's not empathy. That's disgusting, actually. It's just not empathy, right? And we're talking about somebody who understands what people are going through right now and how to actually take it into account in the work that they do, okay? And that's really how it's been expressed. That's one thing. The other thing, and then I will be quiet because I have 10 things really, but the other thing is, and it goes to what we were talking about early on, is that interactivity question. Look, marketing is becoming conversational marketing. It's slowly but surely. It's becoming increasingly that, meaning people are demanding more and more of marketers than ever before. Marketers are also becoming more important than ever, because they're not only doing the kind of let's provide the signal to the noise, but they're now doing let's provide the signal to the signal, meaning they're pushing the content. Has got to be proper. It's got to go to the right place. It's got to be to the right audiences. It's got to be substantial enough in terms of its quality to actually have an impact on the person. And that goes to something that Jack had mentioned earlier, right? So those things are happening. But the one thing that's languished just enormously, and marketers really have to think about this from the standpoint of, is interactivity. I'll give you an example. So this is actually occurred. So there was a conference going on, conversation, it was a speech going on. Chat window opened at the side. The moderator for the chat window, some guy in the chat window tries to ask a question. The moderator's response was direct him to another forum later, which is not how to start a conversation. Then somebody knew this person. And they went, oh, hey, Jack, how you doing? And then someone else said, oh, what are you doing here, Marge? And it goes on and on like this. And literally, there were like 9 people. They had 145 comments. And it looked like, wow, what a lot of comments. But it was basically about how you doing? How's the kids, right? I mean, it had nothing to do with anything related to the conversation that was going, I mean, the speech going on. There was no interactivity, but it was seen as a success. I saw a guy who I actually literally refused to put up the link to him because I just thought it was so embarrassing that this guy genuinely thought this was an important metric. That he said, well, when it comes to the interactivity of comments, you have to put them in context. And his idea of context was if you had 30 comments and you had 200 Facebook followers, well, that was great. And so the actual conversation didn't matter at all. So there was no actual part. So we have to move this from that 2-dimensional, stupid left brain metric to the much more right brain level of participation. Start bringing the people into it. You know the best example, and then I'll be quiet. Just think Bruce Springsteen, Dancing in the Dark, and Courtney Cox, and you'll know what I mean. Pull her out of the audience and onto the stage to be part of it. Living Theater has been doing it for 100 years. Okay, business is starting to do it. I'm finding, I won't go into it now, but there's lots of examples. Anyone want to follow up with me afterwards? I'll tell you plenty. There's a million stories on this. But it's something I think that marketers have to pay attention to because this is going to conversation, participation, and that real level of interactivity.
Definitely. And so going back to, you were saying, Paul, like looking back 100 years, it's, it's finally happening more. And, just kind of, Don answering to your point earlier, Aaron was saying, he agrees the data and tools have changed, but the overall process of marketing is still very much the same discussion, same challenges for 20 years. And I've been covering marketing for 30, and I can tell you the technology stories that I've written are different, but the strategy stories, I could write the same story, could take a story I wrote 30 years ago and just recast the technology in the story and have it be, why can't sales and marketing get along? Like, we can probably write that story 5 years or 10 years from now, right? It's these things keep happening. But Ruth pointed out the data privacy constraints are an existential problem for direct marketers. And I think that is something that's not, new as like the past year, but certainly new as compared to, 20 years ago, and really thinking about how much we need to pay attention to privacy more than ever before.
See, that's where I get stuck, because we recently experienced, without going and naming all these different companies, and I'm not exaggerating when I say an ounce of any of this, that this company would offer you, if you provided them all of your contact information to your banks, to all of your shopping sites. And when I say information, your logins and passwords. And in doing so, giving up that information, they would go out and find the best deals for you. So where I get stuck is I can't imagine anyone possibly doing that stuff. And yet there were millions of people that signed up for this service, millions. And I'm not going to go any further than that and who this is, but it blew my mind away that consumers were so willing to have some form of engagement. Now, in this case, it's likely saving money, right? That's highly likely the biggest reason. But it blew me away from a privacy perspective to literally have to forego your logins and passwords to things that are incredibly valuable, that have so much information. There is a trend, and I don't know, and by the way, this is not just a Gen Z or millennial thing. This is a wide swath of the population that agreed to do this for the sake of saving something. Now, I don't know how that relates to interacting, to the point of Paul's point about empathy and engaging in consumers and all those other kinds of things that I think are relevant. But that consumer privacy thing is the part that, as a marketer, I think it's fantastic to get all that kind of information straight up. I can use that for so many different things. And we're all creative enough to figure out revenue streams to the nth degree on what we can do with all that data. But my goodness, it's to me amazing and frightening at the same time. I don't know if that gets at what you were asking, but Ruth, that is, and I know you know our friend Ken very well, Ken Kreitzer, those are the types of things that blow my mind away. We saw it happen. Millions of people who are willing to give up that kind of information to save some money. So who knows what other types of things they're willing to do. So it's a weird thing for me.
That's amazing. Well, Gerard has a question for all of you. What's your point of view on end user overload? So webinars, texts, emails, how can digital innovation break through the clutter of all that?
I don't think it's about digital innovation. I think, to the point of permission marketing and, push versus pull and all that, I think we blame the technology and we blame the media saturation as a sort of a crutch for not having a killer message. There was a book written by a guy named Tim Sanders called Love is the Killer App. And Paul was talking about empathy, and you probably know Kevin Roberts, the now disgraced Saatchi CEO, but he wrote the book Love Marks. And if you think about brands and emotional connection to audiences, I think we all decide what we're going to consume based on the content and the quality of the content and the nature of the relationship. So I think we're all much more, John Groman, some of you know John, he said that people read their mail 90 miles an hour over the trash can back in the old days when direct mail was our medium of choice. And it's the same thing now. We don't read our mail 90 miles an hour over the trash can, but we basically are in a constant delete mode. And I think that's the nature of the world we live in. And I think we make choices in nanoseconds about what comes in, what comes out. And I've become a big fan of podcasts. And I think the podcast model is very effective. And a lot of them, I think, are mastering, direct, deep, emotional, empathic relationships. But I think most of us are still, and I don't know any of you very well. I know Ruth and I know Ken, but I think most of us are still living in some kind of world of media targeting. And I don't think it's about media targeting, and I don't think it's about channels. I think it's about strategy. It's about message. It's about list, offer, creative. Remember that, And so I think the offers that we're proposing and the creative is just, more. We call it better sameness. A lot of the same stuff. It's just not cutting through. So I think that's the issue today. Not so much media saturation.
I agree with you, Don, completely on that one. I'm definitely +1. The other side is, look, people need to, just because we're human beings and we are who we are, we need to be in control of our lives to the extent we can, right? And ultimately, it's like, for example, on the lowest level, I'm a complete enemy of opt-out, and I'm perfectly happy with opt-in, right? In fact, the first recommendation, without knowing another thing about the company, is if you've got anything that says opt-out, get out of it, right? Drop it, right? So, because ultimately, look, when I wrote my last book was on customer engagement. I have a definition that kind of the book was centered around, and it's the ongoing interaction between company and customer, offered by the company, chosen by the customer. And the key is chosen by the customer, and that, at least that part of it, right? As long as we feel that we have some control over our choices, the overload isn't there, right? We don't have to attend everything. There's no requirement in life that says we do, right? Ginger asked me if I'd like to do this, for example. I could have said no, right? And nobody would have thought that was a terrible thing I did. But, the reality is that to Don's point, this isn't just because we have lots of different kinds of media. How many years ago were we living with the 3,000 messages per day, right? That number, by the way, is nobody has a clue if it's actually accurate. It's just the one we all used, right? Because wow, that's a lot, right? And that we're all talking about, of course, Zoom fatigue and so on, but it's really not Zoom fatigue. We're home all the damn time, right? And we're sitting here and we're doing things all day and night that we didn't do. And like any other thing, we just get tired of it, right? It's not the media. It's the fact that we feel as if we're losing our ability to choose what we do. So you know what? The simplest answer to it is, again, it goes to another major point that Don made, which was on the side of the business side, develop the strategy that actually gives those customers choices that are valuable to them, because the only thing the customer really cares about when it comes to customer value is feeling valued, right? One way or the other, they want to feel valued. You do the things that make them feel valued. There's no such thing as fatigue or overload, right? Because they want what you're providing. On your side as a person, just don't do some of those things. That's it. Just don't do them. I just stop, right? And sit back, watch TV or read a book or sleep or whatever, eat, do those things. So
the way, on the topic of choice, somebody just asked about choice. You're familiar with choice architecture. You've all heard the study of, the jam where you had 24 choices of which kind of jelly to buy in the store, and sales actually shot through the roof when they went from 24 choices to 6. So I don't think it's about choice. I think I don't want to say most marketing. A lot of marketing is just boring. Absolute had a great campaign, Absolute Vodka, years ago, and it was called "Don't Be Boring." That was the name of the campaign. And people would dress up as Absolute bottles and they would pose on the street. And I think what seems to be missing today for me is really imaginative, creative. I mean, even the Super Bowl commercials, and I think whichever ones are going to happen on Sunday, there aren't going to be as many. I just don't think, I don't think there's as much energy and soul and risk taking. I think we live in we live in a cancel culture where people are afraid to do things that are bold and provocative. We've dumbed things down. We rely on programmatic advertising to sell eyeballs at the lowest possible or the highest possible price for Google. And so I think the soul's been sucked out of it in so many ways. To me, I think that's our problem. I think the root of this, and GDPR and privacy, yeah, there are issues, but if somebody's turned on by something, they're gonna open your email, they're gonna click your display ad, they're gonna respond. I think it's on us. I think marketing's become far too scientific and technical, and I think it's good, but we're optimizing the hell out of it to the exclusion of, frankly, bold, inventive, creative. Good headline, good body copy, good image, good call to action. Like, just look at the stuff you get. Every day I look at what I get: inbox, display, email, print, catalogs. It's just a bunch of better sameness. So little imagination.
Let me ask you a question, Don, then, because you wanted a lively discussion. So let me ask it to you, and it's not in the pejorative. Why is it happening? Is it because are we really worried about security and safety? Because I'll tell you, as a former journalist, the thing that absolutely frosts my butt every time is that people get lazy with their words, and especially in our job. That bugs the crap out of me. And again, I annihilate my team sometimes when they write a memo in office about spend some time with critical thinking, be creative about what you're doing, and slow down. So that's my point of view. But I'm curious if there's again, not in the pejorative, why do you think it's happening?
Well, I mean, I'm a suit, but I think the suits have taken over. I think the technocrats have taken over. The lawyers have taken over. Everybody's afraid of offending somebody. And I think we live in a really, boring, bland marketing environment. I mean, I live for the days of David Ogilvy's copywriting. I live for I love that stuff. And I don't live in the past, because I'm looking for juice now. And somebody tell me, what's the most imaginative, creative thing that's gotten your attention in a long time? Everybody's beholden to somebody, whether it's an attorney, a CEO, or a risk-averse creative team who's been burned and told to put the guardrails on their imagination and creativity. So I welcome somebody to challenge me on this. Tell me the best campaign, the best headline. Tell me a body copy that made you cry or brought tears to your eyes. I mean, think about, we're living in a world of programmatic. I keep going back to programmatic because I think in many ways that's the villain, because it works so well. People are buying a lot of stuff online, and they're buying based on past behavior and search intent on Google. And, it works, but where's the love?
Well, you know what? Oh, go ahead, Ginger.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes to see great campaigns, you actually need to look outside the U.S. When I was at Direct Marketing News, we had the Caples International Awards, and some of their creative from outside the U.S. is amazing. And this I'm just going to mention one campaign quickly. And it's back a few years. It just popped into my head the other day. I think either New Zealand or Australia, one of the dog adoption companies were trying to figure out how to get dogs adopted, and because rescues often have a reputation for like not being as good, so they trained 2 dogs how to drive a car. And there's this scene in the video where the dog is literally like leaning on the window and driving this car on this track, and it was amazing. And it's just the creativity of that was, who thought of that? It was awesome, right? But how often do you, to your point, see someone like step out like that? So with that, Paul, your turn.
Yeah, well, but that's to that point. It's the reality is people are afraid to actually do things that are creative if they can't associate it with some KPI that's associated with their work or some financial return that has to be there immediately. And that's ridiculous, actually. Look, I mean, Ginger can attest to this. So me and a friend have this, also an industry analyst in CRM University named Brent Leary, have this show called CRM Players. And we're running things like, and we talk about heavy duty industry stuff, but the reality is we have done it 12 years. We have a huge following. We live stream. We do all these other things. But you know what we did this year during COVID? We did a band competition with 10 corporate bands, and they produced 30 music videos, and they're all, by the way, seriously good. There's nothing. Look, is there any personal benefit to me unless I want to be a music, some sort of Billy Graham and own another Fillmore East or West? No. But boy, was it fun. And the value for some of the smaller companies was they got seen and heard, right? And they were just having a good time doing it. So, I mean, we got to bring that part back, or at least if we haven't ever had it, then start it, right? The reality is that, as cool as that sounds and as fun as that sounds, to Don's point about suits, they're looking for what's the return immediately. And it just doesn't exist with an immediate return. And you have to, theoretically, that's what marketing should be, to get to the point that there are returns later, right? If you're meaning give people the freedom to do the things they do, to be creative at the same time. And you know what, I can be on a soapbox about it, but there are a number of things you can do, but you have to be willing to evangelize your own company. And also, at the same time, you have to align marketing and sales. You also have to disconnect some of that from the direct revenue impact so that you can actually spend the time to develop those kind of things. And it's hard, but you know what? There are companies beginning to do that. And again, in the interest of time, they'll be quiet about all the potential stories.
Somebody mentioned, I think it was Joe, about, I think might have been Amazon doing so well. Who cares if we're not imaginative and creative? And I think he's right. I think, if you work for Google, Amazon, Facebook, or one of the platforms, you don't need to be super creative and smart because you own the data. You've got a gazillion data scientists, but we're not, Google's not on this call. Facebook's not, unless some of you work for these companies. We're the insurgents. We're trying to beat, the man or the machine. And I think that's where this creativity comes back. And in Ginger, you mentioned Australia. Some of you know Alan Rosenspan. He and I used to go to Australia every year and do DMA talks there. And remember their tagline for tourism was, "Where the bloody hell are you?" Like, that's a great tagline. Like, that's Australia, man. Go with who you are. And, and can people unmute, Ginger, or do they have to chat?
Well, I was asking people to chat to versus unmute, so it would not be,
and crazy. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I just want somebody who's, who maybe strongly disagrees or agrees, because I'm starting to have fun. And it's, what is it, 6 o'clock or something? It's 6:30. It's after hours. It's open mic night, and I've never been to one of these. You'll probably never invite me back, but I think this is really exciting. There's a lot of experience and talent. I can just see some of you on this call, and I'd like to get to the root of what the real issue is here. I just would love to, like, how are you going to double your income this year? What are you going to do in your job that's going to double your income? Or how do you keep from getting fired? Or what are the existential issues that we should be talking about right now?
Well, so I can bring up a question from Jennifer. So starts with an observation, then goes to the question. She was saying that Zoom meetings and text marketing have become platforms of the future. Yes, change is constant and evolving. In meeting the challenge of change, you will see new jobs. So the question is, now that more people are connecting via Zoom, via text, how can marketers and companies stay ahead of the curve, stay ahead of their competitors?
Again, I think it goes back to this issue of media fatigue. You know, just because we've got new channels doesn't mean anything. You know, we've got 50,000 TV channels, 50,000 newspapers, blogs, podcasts. You know, we're swimming in that stuff. So I can't wait to delete text messages I get from spammers. I mean, just it's driving us all crazy. So I wouldn't, I mean, if I was giving advice to a young person in this profession, you know, I wouldn't advise them to try to become media experts, because I think it's all going to be automated. And I do think this is where machine learning and AI are winning the battle. You know, I would say, you know, try to understand how to understand human behavior, back to Paul's point about empathy and understanding the core motivators. You know, human beings have two principal genetically wired drivers: survival and procreation. Those are the two things that we are hardwired to do. And then everything flows from there. And if you think about the motivators that get people to react to advertising or marketing, it's some derivative of those things: lust, love, greed, fear, uncertainty. I mean, all the insecurities and frailties we have as people. It's so much more interesting to take a sociological point of view, I think, to marketing than the data side of it. And I respect the data. Obviously, I'm all about data, but I just think I think the ship has sailed. I just think programmatic's ruling the world. I'm not sure how much better any of us are going to get than a computer.
Jack, any thoughts on that?
Did you ask if I had any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
I'm getting massively depressed now.
My inspiration. This is my
I just
moment.
tell
Oh
my
God.
shoulders are sagging. I mean, we're programming everything. And recently there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said they can replicate one of the best journalists' style. I forget whose it was. They've got a machine that can literally write articles for us. And so that that does scare me and alarm me. I'm still encouraged in some odd way that there is a form of connection. I'm not sure if you guys are fans of his work or his book, but I did like Simon Sinek's most recent book, and I'm drawing a blank on its name all of a sudden now. But it essentially discusses a lot of what we're talking, the infinite game, and how everything we're talking about now is arbitrary, right? The limits, all these other kinds of things. I love what you said, Paul, about in a chat room of 130 comments, 128 of them are people talking back and forth, and there's 2 people that are engaged. If I'm a marketer, I want to find those 2 people who are asking me questions. I'm not trying to be crass. I don't give a shit about anybody else. Talk among yourselves, but I'm in a room full of people that are being myopic, and I want to know who wants to have a relationship with me. So even though Don has thoroughly brought me down, we're just going to live in a dystopic environment. I'm hopeful that marketers will start to change things. The book by the founder of Netflix, how he changed the culture. I do think Paul brought on something, and we both talked about empathy. It also starts with the organization. There's more HR branding going on nowadays than there is on the marketing side. There are people being hired as chief culture officers that are affecting the corporate brands that more people consumers engage in the product. That's got to tell you something. And so it's not just about a place to work because it's fun. It's that they're creating an enterprise where people feel like they're making a contribution. Lemonade, someone brought up Lemonade in the chat. I think they hired Dan Ariely, I believe his name, was a social psychologist, to help them understand how to build their organization better and do things differently for consumers. And that gives me hope that we'll have some form of engagement. Yeah, Amazon and the big behemoths are going to do their things. But boy, I still hold out hope, Don, that we're not just all going to be programmed robots. I don't want to be in the Matrix, even though it might exist.
There's a renaissance. I think there's a renaissance. And I think because we have so optimized media and targeting and application and analysis and application.
I agree.
I think there's a renaissance for all of us, whether you're 21 or 71 or anywhere in between, And I think it goes back to some of the fundamentals. People buy from people and brands that they like, trust, and respect. It's that simple. And I just think we've sucked a lot of the life out of
Agreed.
communications because we're afraid of, it's not just about being canceled, but, we're afraid about crossing lines. And if you go back to the best campaigns in history, and if you read, somebody said they're judging the echoes. I don't know what the echoes are like, but I think the best advertising's always been in Europe, by the way. I mean, the Germans, man, they know how to do it. They use nudity and sex and cuss. They do all the inappropriate things that we'd never do, but they get people's attention, And I'm not advocating for breaking a lot of glass, but Jack, I feel that this is a good message, that there's a great opportunity and that we're not losing out to, the robots. So I'm encouraging us to take more risk, to be more bold.
I agree.
I think Love Marks by by Kevin Roberts, I think was genius. I really think he tapped into something that was deep and profound, and he sort of left in the middle of the night from Saatchi, but it's a really profound thought piece. And I think Seth Godin's doing great work. I think there's a lot of great thought leaders out there. Gary, he's sort of he's polarizing, whether you like Gary Vee or not, but he's got a huge following, and this is the kind of stuff he's talking about.
Well, I know, Paul, sounds like you don't like Gary. I do appreciate him for some of the alternative thinking he does. The one thing I think is cool about being a marketer nowadays, this is where I sit. I like the fact that there's a lot of different channels and avenues and places to go. I do agree with you that we got to be more willing to take risks and be creative. I think about what some banks have done in our business, and I don't mean to bring up Reddit vis-a-vis everything that's happened with GameStop, et cetera. But you can just hang out in channels if you want to. What I really encourage our company to do is spend a lot of time in social media analytics. Let me just bear with me as I round this for you guys. If you just go into Reddit and you go into other channels and use tools that help you evaluate it, read what people are saying. To me, that's the biggest advantage we have right now. Forget the damn data and the there's the two types, right? There's the focus groups, which is the non-specific, right? It's stated behavior as opposed to actual. Go into Reddit. I dove into Reddit years ago because I had a 15-year-old son who was into music. And next thing you know, I'm going, holy cow, what is this environment? And just dive in there, because there's a place where they talk about credit cards. Like, what's the best card? I don't mean just the points guy and what he does, where they just talk about what's the best card to buy for whatever reason. But listen to what they're saying. And that to me is maybe I'm showing my age here, but spend some time listening to people. And that's perhaps your empathy point, Paul. And so for me as a marketer, to go into some of these channels and see what people want, it then becomes, oh, well, that was easy to create now. Everyone's saying they want a red-haired car with red colors on it and blue stripes. Well, I'm going to go make one of those. That's what I think we're missing. There's actual behavior you can get from data, sure, and what they're purchasing. But listen to what people are saying, and it's easy to do. Tools like social media analytics tools like Meltwater, et cetera, they give you information. So that's why I'm trying to round this now. I think there's so many opportunities for us marketers if we just kind of chill and see what's in front of us and participate. Remember, we're consumers too. So
yeah, and that to me, that's totally the point. I've had this mantra for 20 plus years with CRM, and literally the last edition of my book was 800 pages. I'm not kidding, but the mantra is literally like 2 sentences. It's, if a customer likes you and continues to like you, they'll continue to do business with you. If they don't, they won't. Right. And that's pretty much how it all works, because ultimately this boils down to how we feel about things. Right. All of us. And that's where the creativity comes in too. Look, let's say this. When Don, you were talking about, 21 to 71 and anywhere in between, I'm literally at the 71 part. Right. So I was thinking, oh, great. Thanks a lot. Right. Thanks a lot. You couldn't have gone to like 74. Right. So, the thing is that, so I've been around a long time, and, childhood 60s, still am a leftist, the whole thing, right? And when the millennials came along, I just thought, what a bunch of spoiled brats, right? And I literally did. I'm not old school in any way, which is the irony of all that, even though it sounds that when I say it. But, because of this, for example, I've spent an enormous amount of time in a room across the hall, building a studio. I mean, literally, I invested tens of thousands of dollars in building a studio in the house that we can use for broadcasting. Now, I'm retiring in like a year and a half. I don't really need it. I just want to do it because it's fun and I can have an impact. And I know it's the way I have to deliver things now, right? Because that's how people actually listen and hear them. And then I can also get them to tell me stuff because they're there. They're literally having as close to an actual conversation as you can in a digital environment. And the reality is, you know who I learned that from? All the millennials who are on YouTube telling me what to do, right? And I literally watched them I hit Malcolm Gladwell's peak on that one. I mean, 10,000 hours of millennials, right? Telling me how to do this thing. And then I'm watching some of what they do, everything ranging from production values to actual just the broadcasting. And I've broadcasted since I got on bullhorns in college, so I don't have a problem broadcasting, but I learned a lot. And the one thing I learned is they love what they're doing when they do this. It's not like some of them are making a bloody fortune doing it, but some of them are just doing it because they just utterly love it. And you can feel it, right? And you know what? They're taking a giant risk. Why? Because they're broadcasting, they may have 3 followers and they're still putting in all this time and they're not getting any real benefit other than maybe hearing themselves, but they genuinely love it and the content is good and you can actually learn from them and it becomes valuable, despite the fact that they don't have a vast audience. These are the things when we talk about, it's not like we're taking risks that are unknowable. I mean, we're taking risks with approaches that are actually there already. We just have to start applying them in business and in marketing in ways that we just haven't been doing. And I think both, Don and Jack, both of you have both explicitly said that and implicitly said that throughout. And I completely agree with that. And I just think take a shot, you know what? And the tough part when you're obviously in a business environment is you have to convince someone to let you do it if you're not the actual owner, right? So, but you know what? It's worth it. And the impact, and you want to measure it, right? You'll find a measurement that'll work. But that's the one downside of measurements and data, which is you can prove anything you want with them, right? So, but I just think I'm as optimistic as Don you actually are, and as Jack as you are. I think right. I think it's right. We're at a time now where this is the time to start taking those risks and doing the creative things. I'll give you one last example on these are little an example on that. I want to look at Salesforce and Adobe real fast. Okay, so Adobe decided when all this hit that, I go to 30 some odd conferences a year as an analyst, and I'm going to 40 or 50 virtual ones because I can literally there's 3 in 3 tabs on the same day, right? So Adobe decided, despite everyone's advice to them, to hold their conference on the day it was supposed to be held, which is March 31st. Last year, despite the Digital Experience Cloud conference, despite everyone's advices, no one has to go there. You don't have to do it on the same day. No one's losing plane fares and hotel rooms. You can wait until you get it right. And they got it completely wrong. And it was horrible at every level. And by the way, they use one platform for communications I heartily recommend against, which is Blue Jeans, which is awful. So then they did the Creative Summit, when they did the Creative Cloud side, and they took their time and they built it out and they took some advice that actually the CTO of Pegasystems once said, which is we have to move from being theatrical to cinematic. And there was this immersive cinematic thing that they did with their with the Adobe Max conference, which deals with with Creative Cloud, Photoshop, Lightroom, all that, and it was brilliant conference, and the content was strong, and people were excited, and the interactivity was good, and the people just got involved. That's when you're starting to see some creativity. You're not worried about the constraint of time that we used to have with conferences because you had to be there on certain dates, certain time, because you had a contract, blah, blah, blah. The other thing, and it goes to the final point, and again, as Jack said, I'm rounding this out, is Salesforce. Look, despite what you think about Salesforce at every level, there's one thing they are brilliant at, and they are fundamentally brilliant at this, which is they understand how to externalize their culture, right? And they're the only company that does it at the level that they do it even close. And as much as you say, well, Mark Benioff's always promoting, yeah, he is. But you know what? The reality is their culture is geared toward making you as a participant in it. Well, I'm sorry. Whether you're an employee, a customer, a prospect, or someone just paying attention to them, they make you feel is that as you will be following them, watching them, seeing what they're doing, you will become a participant in what that is. And they're brilliant at actually engaging people in a way that brings them in to the Salesforce culture, which involves, of course, doing all the philanthropic work, et cetera, et cetera. And you feel like, wow, this is better than just buying a product. And they are absolutely genius at that with Trailblazer, with their Trailblazers and Trailhead. Trailhead started out as training, ended up externalization of culture. So with that, I'm saying there are examples that are there already. We've learned from some of the mistakes already. You know, there's ways to go about this now, but to both Don and Jack's point, the reality is somebody, if you're not the boss, somebody has to say, okay, go do it. And that's your job. I hate to say this, but you got to be the evangelist in these cases. That's all.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That was great. And so, you know, kind of bringing it back around to all of you talking about how important culture is. David made a comment that, you know, marketing is more challenging because you have to pay more attention to culture, and, you know, customers aren't going to connect with your products. They're going to connect with who you are, and regardless of the benefits, because you're understanding them in culture. I thought that was a great point. You know, this has been fantastic. We're really on a roll, but of course we're out of time. We're kind of past out of time. So I want to thank all of you so much for being here, and thank you all for staying extra. It was such a fun conversation. Paul, Don, and Jack, thanks so much for all of your insight and sharing your opinions with us tonight, and your knowledge. And you know, we have a huge lineup of great events coming up. We've really got it going. So, you know, we've got comedy and cocktails on February 11th. So a few laughs. Maybe we'll do, you know, a little bit of a marketing roast. On February 17th, we have Axiom CEO and Starista CEO talking about trends in customer identity management. Talking about virtual meetings. March 3rd, we're going to talk about techniques to elevate your virtual meetings. For example, like not sitting too close, but even more strategic things than that. And personal branding. Actually, EB, who's here in the audience, is going to be a co-host of the virtual branding event. So that's exciting. And a wine tasting on April 8th. Get your orders in early because registration ends for that on March 15th. So with that said, thank you all so much again, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Good night, everyone.